Hello and welcome to PodCrash episode number 17.
Hello.
Yeah, hello Phil. Today's guest is David Smith MBE. He is a karate black belt. He's done bobsleigh, athletics. He won a Paralympic gold medal in rowing in 2012. He's a Team GB cyclist at the moment. He's a columnist. He was the British skiing coach. He was a skier. He's played shinty and he's also a bouncer.
Very interesting.
So you can say hello if you want.
Hello. I guess, just trying to avoid a real job, really, I guess.
Bouncer's a real job, I guess. But
it can be classed as a real job.
from what you've told me off air, British skiing coach wasn't a real job, though.
It was definitely a real job. That was hard work. I remember I learned a lot in that job. And Mark Tilston, who was my boss at that point, I remember we were in Adelboden for a World Cup with Alan Baxter, who's slalom at that point, and I turned up to a meeting without a notepad. And this was my first lesson. I never turned up to a meeting. So I got to this meeting with Mark Tilson. He had driven over and sat down with Mark, and he just looked at me and he went, "Never turn up to a meeting with me with no notepad."
No, that's a good top tip.
And then left. So I was like, all right.
I told Phil about the notepad and look at him
you
now.
did.
He's got a notepad.
I've got a notepad.
That's what,
He's got a fancy pen as well. He's like step one to being a big businessman.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Team England pen, actually.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
They've got fancy pens. Our Team Scotland pens are pretty shit compared to that.
yeah. It's a Commonwealth Games notebook. and
Can't fight
pen.
with big budgets, can you?
But my question is, what is shinty?
Shinty, how do we explain shinty to a German
Well, it's actually
British
like-
man who drinks straight cough mixture from a
Well-
ball? How do we explain
I've
it
got
to-
bad cough.
Phil's a little bit unwell, just to make that clear. He's not got an addiction to cough medicine yet.
Yeah.
We don't have any teas. Well, teaspoons are 2 floors up from the studio, so I guess just drinking from the bottle is the way that Phil likes to live his life.
Yeah. It's pretty.
Whether it's Grey Goose or cough medicine, he's all about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he might be naturally gifted for shinty then. You know,
He's not. I mean, like
he's a tough guy. So
This is a man who's
But-
found his niche, though. Like he is built to be man one and do nothing else. Like
goalie.
goalie. I mean, it's a bit of a Highland sport, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because to be honest, I've seen it, but I don't actually really know what it is.
So you never heard about it growing up in the city?
Nah, city boy.
City boy.
City boy.
More hockey and
But it's rough, isn't it?
it's rough. So it's like hurling. I don't know. Have you seen hurling? Irish hurling?
Never seen it, no.
Is it Gaelic
It's
football?
Gaelic football type thing. So it's basically like a combination of ice hockey on a pitch. There's 12 asides with 12 players. You've got a defence, a midfield, and a forward line. And the objective is you've got a little leather ball, and the objective is just to put the leather ball in the back of the net on your opposing team.
Okay.
And actually, if you look at the history, I think golf originated from shinty. Shinty is a real old sport, and I think that golf found its roots in shinty. So it's a really passionate Highland sport. You have there's two teams that are really sort of, I guess, main rivals. So you have Newtonmore and Kingussie. They're 3 miles apart, and it's like a Scotland-England rivalry. And that was sort of, I grew up, I guess, playing for Newtonmore. And that was my first experience of sport, was running around with a shinty stick. They say in Newtonmore, as soon as you can walk, like, you get a shinty stick put in your hand.
Really?
And when we were at Newtonmore Primary School, the main objective wasn't the curriculum, it was shinty. So basically, at the time, the headmaster was like, if you guys are winning the shinty, you don't have to worry about your grades.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so
fair.
our goal, there was 3 of us our goal was to get gym shed duty. Gym shed duty meant basically you got the whole of Friday afternoon off. So at that point, we thought we were winning. We were like, yeah, look at those idiots sitting studying. We're going to do gym shed duty if we win the midweek game.
Yeah.
And you don't realise until you go to apply for university.
Yeah.
what's your grades? Well, I did gym shed duty.
That sounds like your attitude to school a little bit. Because one of the best stories he told me was that.
Oh no, here we go again.
So he basically just went, yeah. So for 1 year in school, we all agreed to not try and not listen to the teacher. So we just did that, and literally just sat. and did
No,
nothing.
it's not how it went.
How did that work out for you? Well, it's done. You've been all right. You,
So that's when I was in sports school. I knew I would repeat the class anyways later in the year, so I just thought, what's the point in like actually working hard for the last half year?
What's the point in getting ahead when you can just sit and do nothing?
Because I wanted to repeat it anyway, so I thought I'd just focus on my cycling anyways. And just trained.
But don't paint yourself as a model athlete here.
Is that why he's
focusing
man?
on your cycling's a bit of a stretch.
Is that why he
to be
was
fair, I
man
was
one?
focusing on the cycling, but I was also quite lazy back in the days. And I don't think I ever my goal when I was in school was just becoming a professional cyclist. So school wasn't really a big focus for me. My focus was becoming a professional cyclist. So that was my kind of mindset. I just didn't really care. It's probably not a good example to the listeners here.
Yeah, don't follow that.
Yeah, don't follow that.
He likes to put himself in the same bracket. So like Lewis Aliva, so it was basically 3 of us came on the team at the same time as kids who went through the system. So it was Lewis Aliva, Kian Amadi, who were both kind of like Oxbridge standard.
Yeah.
And then myself, who also had like a university place. And then Phil likes to walk along and say, yeah, well, if cycling wouldn't have worked out, I probably would have gone to university as well. And we're sitting there and we're like, with what? With what?
With what?
I've got my, what do you call it?
GCSEs?
Yeah, I think it's a bit higher in Germany.
Is it?
different.
Yeah, everything's always better in Germany.
Everything's better. Everything's better.
Cars
Anyway,
are better.
I'm sure we'll dip into Phil's experiences at German boarding school in a different podcast further down the line. We don't want to waste we don't want to have all the stories at once. So Shinty was your first sport, but you were actually born with a club foot when you were quite young as well. So that seems like quite a tough thing to come through. It's a lot of breakages and then reconstructing your foot and all that kind of stuff. And that kind of continued to affect you a little bit through your sporting career, I guess.
Yeah, I think the crazy thing with that is that's actually what saved my life 30 years down the line.
Really?
That's why I ended up in Paralympic sport, was because of my foot. So yeah, I was initially born with this club foot, and they used to recreate. I didn't go through the surgery; they just recreated it, set the bones, and they put me in, I guess, what was Forrest Gump boots, really. And I remember they told my parents, don't take those boots off, never take those boots off. And then there was one night I was screaming in pain, crying. And my mum and dad were having this argument of like, do we take these boots off or not? And they decided to take them off, and my legs were black basically from the knees down. So if they hadn't taken the boots off, I would have been for sure a double amputee from the knees down. So thankfully they took them off and they saved it. And really, I don't notice it. I'm pretty lucky, and the club foot can be pretty bad, and I didn't notice it. The only thing is it wasn't designed for high performance sport. And I would find that as the years I went through all the different sports I was in, the foot was the major problem. And eventually that's kind of what led me to Paralympic sport and saved my life. So all that stress of having that foot problem was almost a blessing in disguise. If not, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you guys now.
Is that a dig? But yeah, no. But I want to delve a little bit deeper into it, because there's probably not many Paralympians out there that have done as much sport as you have in able-bodied, not realizing that they could be eligible for a Paralympic class. So how did that all come about?
Yeah, it's weird. I look at it 2 ways now, because I look back and think, God, if I'd actually realized 20 years ago I classified, how different would that have been? Would I have gone to Paralympics 20 years ago in Sydney and competed, and how different would life have been? And at that point I was trying to be an able-bodied athlete, and I was continually injured. I was doing 200 400 meters on the track, and I had multiple stress fractures through my right leg. And eventually at the Scottish Champs, where I was running at 200 meters, the navicular bone snapped clean in half. And obviously,
whoa, hold on.
Yeah.
Like, we can't just brush over this shit. Like, we're probably going to do this quite a way through the podcast at various points. But so most people get like a stress fracture.
Yeah.
But you were running and it broke clean in half.
The navicular cracked. So there'd been a stress fracture there for most of the winter. And then obviously when you come out, the forces when you run off the bend in the 200 are quite high. And that navicular just basically cracked right the way through. God. And I heard it. I heard the crack as I came off the bend. I was in a pretty decent position actually when I came off the bend. I remember there was a guy, Brian Doyle, who is...
This isn't the important point. Like, I was in a good position. The important point to that story is I snapped a bone in half.
Snapped a bone.
Running. Yeah.
Anyway, so I tried to rehab that. And it was kind of during that rehabilitation process I started to realize that there was some deformities in the foot when they were desperately trying to get the foot into dorsiflexion and it wouldn't go. And then we started to delve through my medical records, and that's when I started to realize about the foot. But I didn't realize it classified for Paralympic sport. It wasn't until later on, I was with another physio who said, "Hey, I work in Paralympic sport. London's got the games. You actually classify." And I didn't even know what that word meant at that point. I was like, classify with what? And they're like, go, phone up the British Paralympic Association. So I did, and went along to a talent day. And then again, it was a good decision I made, because it was literally, I was only 6 months into Paralympic sport when the tumour started to creep up. And thankfully I was in a sport that had a lot of support. I was at GB Rowan. They had tons of support compared to where I'd come from. And they had all the diagnostics and everything in place to find the tumour, which was pretty lucky.
Well, I'm sure we'll get onto that in a sec, but just before we finish up with the kind of able-bodied sporting career, like you were pretty good as well. Like, would you say athletics was the area where you found most success?
I wouldn't ever say I was pretty good. I just enjoyed it. I didn't want to compete against other people. So for sport, for me, I just wanted to be an athlete so I could see how far I could push my own body and my own mind. So I used to just enjoy going out running, lifting weights, and just to see how far I could do. I had a gym in my house. I'd go in the punch the punch bag for an hour until I could basically not punch anymore. So it was always just a test internally with myself. So I think psychologists would have probably a bigger insight into that psychology. But there was definitely something that drove me, and it wasn't to compete against other people. It was just this inner drive to see, okay, how far can I go?
But I guess in a way that's quite healthy for sports psychology, because they always say don't look left or right, focus on yourself.
Yeah, so it actually works out pretty well. But I think there's probably a bit more underlying stuff it's driving that. It's probably, but it's that same thing that's kept me alive and kept me going through all the surgeries. So I think I love my athletics. If I could have chose any sport that I'd have loved to have been an Olympic champion, it would have been the 400 meters. I just loved it. I loved everything about it. Unfortunately, trying to run around the bends with the foot, and also that I didn't know I had a tumor at that point. I really struggled. But I'd say, I won East of Scotland 400 meter championships, and I ran against Ian Mackey and managed to get a bronze, finishing sort of 10, 15 meters behind him, and that was a big thing. He was he was one of the fastest white men in the world. Beat Linford Christie, beat Donovan Bailey, who was the Olympic champion at that point. He made the semi-finals at Atlanta in '96.
I think we can class this as pretty good then. Like,
so
there's no place for modesty in this show.
So I reckon if I'd had no foot problem, no tumor, and had I could have probably ran a pretty decent time. I just never got the opportunity.
So obviously you've done like tons of different sports, and like given that you've got almost that, I think you're not alone, especially in cycling, and maybe it's in general with athletes. This is kind of coming to my question, but people always talk about cycling as being, you have to be a little bit almost like sadistic, I guess. Like it's the sport. It seems to be one of the sports where you can suffer and suffer and suffer and suffer, and it attracts people that are happy to push themselves. Not Phil, but it attracts people. That,
I'm looking at Phil.
But it attracts people that want to push themselves to the absolute limit. So, like, what's if you were to describe yourself and you say like, what sport do you do, or even like, what sport is your first love? Like, what would you say?
It's the suffering. It's hard to choose one. Like I sometimes think, and every sport's got something different. Like for pure out suffering, rowing is a pretty brutal sport because you're sitting going backwards, so you're not even getting to see anything. You're literally either sitting looking at an erg machine, or you're on the river and you're going backwards, and you have to be on the water at 7 a.m. So that's a pretty brutal sport to suffer in. At least when we suffer in cycling, we also get really great training camps where we can go and ride in the Alps and stuff. So
apart from you, if you're on the velodrome, you see the same
apart
thing.
from Phil, but so, he just rides out in circles. He's really got to enjoy the suffering. So I can't choose one. This thing, but I think the one thing that runs in parallel, like you say, is that you get to suffer in every one of them, and there's something really enjoyable about the suffering. And I think what's interesting is that that's helped me deal with the pain of surgery, where I see a lot of people really can't handle the pain. That actually my relationship with pain, I guess, is like every athlete's relationship with pain. We kind of enjoy it.
Yeah, it's quite an alien concept to try and get across to the general public a little bit. Like I'll say, like when you're doing a kilo, it's like, which for sprinters is a maximum effort. It's like 1 minute long, and it's really on the limit of what a sprint athlete can do, and it's really kind of on the limit in the other way of what an endurance athlete can do. And I'm kind of saying, like, when you're coming into that last turn and you're just trying to keep the bike upright, and you start to get this darkness kind of encroaching in from the side of your eyes, and you come off. And if you want to see a man suffer, you can look at Jeffrey Hoogeland at the World Championships 2 years ago.
Yeah, and up at 2018.
He was in an absolute state for about like an hour afterwards, something like that. But like that's what we live for. We love it, apart from Phil. Because I remember one time like talking about the ability to unlock yourself. Phil used to have this saying like, "Don't worry, mate. When it comes to competition, I always go 2 times faster." And I was like, "Well, that's great because I'm looking for guys to chase, and then as soon as it comes to competition, I get left for dead." But like one time, Shane Sutton came down to him, and he offered you some money to go quicker.
Yeah,
I've heard this story.
Yeah, so we discussed on that.
Yeah, so like, "Oh yeah, mate, I'll give you 20 quid if you go 2 times faster."
Yeah. I always need something that.
Yeah, of course you did.
I kind of need like a start number on my back to be able to like dive into like a deeper way of my performance. Like I really struggle to train fast, but then as soon as like a competition or something, I step it up a bit. And
there's an argument for that in sprinting a little bit, because if you look at, like, I always think that Jason Kenny gets the balance like 100% right. Like, there's very rarely you see him go. Sorry, Jason, but there's very rarely you see him go 100%.
Yeah.
Like, in training and everything like that, he's always sitting about 98, 99%.
Yeah.
And then if you look at the statistics of his injury rate, I think his first ever scan, given that he'd been to three Olympic Games without ever having a scan.
Wow. That's pretty unique, I guess, in British sport, isn't it?
Exactly. And you think, well, any sport, you think like athletes just get scanned like all the time.
Yeah.
It becomes
a norm.
It's pretty bad for radiation, I guess.
But I think it's easy for an athlete I've always found it's just easy to smash yourself.
Yeah.
But apart from maybe Phil.
Guys, please.
but I think it's like an genetic thing that we all have from, I don't know if it's nurture or nature, are we born with it, or is it something we're exposed to at a young age?
Yeah.
But I think it's easy just to say, like, I can smash myself, but actually the smart athlete is maybe like Phil, he's maybe going to get the last laugh. And Chris, I think, was that as well.
Yeah.
Empty it at the right point.
Yeah.
There's no point.
That's how I kind of sum up spinning as well. It's like, if you can't be where you're sitting right now to putting your heart rate up to 220 beats per minute in less than 30 seconds, then you're not going to be a sprinter.
Yeah.
It's that ability to like stress every single sinew and every single muscle fiber in your body to exert that amount of extreme effort into that small space of time. And then when it comes to endurance or something like that, you guys are just extending that over a longer period, I guess.
Yeah. And I think, that's where when we talked about the favourite sports and stuff, that's why I was gutted when the kilo especially the kilo and the pursuit were moved from the Olympics, because I felt like it killed that raw, just like who can suffer the most. And I feel that's a big loss to the Olympic program for cycling to have that. And I think and we still have obviously the road time trial and stuff, and the endurance guys still get a big hit out, but it would be nice to see the sprinter guys getting as well, because I think people don't realise. People say, only 4 laps of the track, how can that be hard?
Oh, it's hard.
But like I always say to people, try that third lap.
Yeah, exactly. So given that you didn't know much about Paralympic sport and all that kind of stuff, I guess going in blind, you probably didn't have many expectations about what Paralympic sport was like. So how did it feel kind of coming into that sport? And then I guess, Paralympic sport always seems to be kind of facing the same kind of uphill battle that maybe a lot of female sport faces in terms of struggling for coverage, trying to get exposure, all that kind of stuff. How did that feel? Did that become quite evident early on, or was it, basically, what did you think of Paralympic sport when you came into it blind, I guess?
Yeah, it was, I guess, so my first exposure to Paralympic sport was at Sydney. So I broke the navicular before going to and I went out to Sydney to watch the Olympics. And then the day my flight was flying home was the same day the Paralympic team was flying home. And I thought, I want a good seat in the plane. So what I'm going to do is put my boot back on and take my sticks and go to the airport to get a good seat. Of course, did I not turn up to the airport with probably every Paralympic team in the world? And I was like, maybe this is karma. Maybe this is why I ended up in Paralympic sport. So I was like, shit. I was like, God, man, I can't do this. My conscience is too bad. But I ended up with the whole middle row. So, but when I was lying down, I wasn't complaining. So that was, I guess, the first time I've seen it. But actually, when I went to Paralympic sport, my first exposure to it was tough. And I'm not going to lie. One of the very first meetings we had at British Rowan, David Tanner, who was the performance director, and I hate to call him out on this, but we were known as the Adaptives.
Right. So
I turned up.
It's a good superhero name in a way.
Well, it kind of is, yeah. So
sounds like a business cliche.
Business cliche of here comes the Adaptives. But the way he kind of spoke to us was like we were this alien group. So it was like the Olympic team and the Adaptives. And I hated that word. I hated this word adaptive rowing. And I was like, well, we're not. We're athletes. An athlete's an athlete. We're racing. It's the same thing. We're on boats. They're on boats. We've got the same dreams, the same goals, the same aspirations. Just us getting to the start line is a little bit more challenging. But he made a big thing about this adaptive. So we had 2 occasions after the World Championships. He did this talk, and he said that, it's really great to have the adaptives with us. They've really managed to fit in. And I was standing in this. At this point, all I had was club foot. I didn't know I had a tumor. Yeah. And I'm standing there thinking, well, wait a minute, I'm not stupid. I'm not like, I train as hard as any of these guys, and I'm as dedicated as these guys. Only difference is I'm in a slightly different category. That's all. And then we had a performance meeting one day, and he sat there and he's like, okay, Adaptives, I hope you've got a real good opportunity here to learn from the Olympians. You can really learn from the Olympians and how to be an athlete and he had all this stuff, and that was him, you know, and that wasn't the perception of the whole world. It was just one person. But at that point, that was my first exposure. And I remember saying to myself at that point, you know, my only goal in rowing is to leave the sport in a better place than where I found it. And the guys that are racing in the rowing team now are so fast. They've stepped on amazingly, and I'm so proud to have been part of that legacy. You know, I wouldn't even make the team now. And it was great to see that, because I sort of felt that that was a turning point for Paralympic sport. Then obviously London came along. London changed the perception of it all. What Channel 4 did there was amazing. Paralympic athletes, not everyone, but some of them got more exposure. Some got more endorsements, which was great. And they were sort of recognised for their performance, not their disability.
Yeah, Johnny Peacock.
Johnny
and things
Peacocks
like
and stuff.
Yeah,
You know, people
David
don't start.
Wolf,
It's your performance. And that point was challenging, because I said, you know, I was a little bit embarrassed, because I'd obviously strived to be an Olympian all my life, and now I'm doing Paralympian. I would just say I'm an Olympian and not think of it, and then people would pick you up and stuff. And that transition was quite hard mentally. And then eventually, when I came to leave rowing and come to cycling, it was the first thing I noticed when I went to cycling. I didn't feel like a Paralympian at cycling. I just felt like a cyclist. And that was amazing. And that's why I really fell in love with the sport, because there was everyone just known as, well, you're in the British.
Yeah, we trained together.
Yeah, and it was like one big family, and I felt that from my very first day at the velodrome, which was quite nice.
Well, that's interesting, because I still think that we've got a lot of work to do in that sense. So that's interesting that you think there was such a divide in rowing, and then I still perceive there being a slight divide in cycling. But given the comparison, that's probably why it seemed like a family, I guess.
Yeah.
But what I want to, the kind of final question in the Paralympic bit, is you see a lot of different strategies out there for people trying to, like, whether it's female sport, Special Olympics, Paralympics, something like that. How do these guys get the exposure, and how do they grow the sport? Because I think, for me personally, sometimes I think that when you see an athlete who's constantly critical, it doesn't always move the thing forward. Yeah. If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You'll know as well as me the athletes that we might be referencing to here, where it's like, it doesn't matter what's there, it's going to be awful.
Yeah.
And so how do you think that moves forward? And there's, do you think things like the Commonwealth Games, where they have Paralympic sport alongside able-bodied sport, makes a lot of sense? And do you think other instances, like, guys having to cover up Olympic tattoos when they get to the Paralympic Games is something that needs to change and is quite damaging? Like, what the take on the whole landscape?
Yeah. Wow, everything.
Yeah. So how do we move it forward?
How do we move it forward? Yeah. I think first of all is that capture the stories behind the athletes. I think that's very powerful in Paralympic sport. Obviously every Olympian has a great story as well, but in the Paralympics there is some seriously powerful stories where there's been a congenital or someone's developed an injury later on in life. So I think if we focus on the stories, we get the positives. And we try to maybe not listen to the athletes who are critical, because no one wants to hear the negative stuff, and you get trapped in an argument, a political argument of this should be this and this should be that, and that leads to the tattoos side of things. And whether, should a Paralympic athlete have the Olympic rings? And in my view, I don't see why not. If that's what they want to do, that's what they want to do. It's parallel to the Olympics. And if it was up to me, I would love to I know this will go against some established Paralympians who like to have their own identity, but just from my personal perspective, it's not right, it's not wrong, but I'd love it just to be one big games. Not at the same time, so the Olympic guys come in, there's a 2-week break, and at that point the Paralympic guys come in, but the rings are still there, so they don't have to rip everything down, the money that would be saved, and it just goes under the one thing as the games. Maybe in 100 years from now it will be that. But I think that would move everything on a lot more. And also it is down to the media, and some people, I remember reading the Daily Mail when Joanna won her gold, that someone in the Daily Mail said they didn't want to see her without her wig on in the page of the Daily Mail.
So it's a four women event.
Yeah.
And they ended up posting a photo of Laura Trott at the time, Eleanor Barker and Katie Archibald, and they actually cropped out Joanna Vozel.
Yeah.
Did they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is terrible.
Who suffers from alopecia.
Yeah. And the director or the editor of the Daily Mail said that he didn't want to sit at his breakfast and look at that. So if that's the opinion you have from the person who's in charge of a media movement, he ain't going to put on a triple amputee up there. you know? So I think there's this thing that people sometimes don't want to, they get a bit uneasy about it. I get it with my tumour and stuff, and guys I've been with, who have amputees, and people stare, and people are a little bit uneasy about it, and sometimes they're scared to ask. And I think that London really changed that. It really brought Paralympic sport into people's living rooms, and I remember going to a hospital and asking a kid about his leg, and he actually wanted his leg to be amputated so he could get a blade, because blades are now cool.
Yeah.
Where when I was at school, blades would not have been cool. You'd have got bullied for sure if you had a blade. But now they're cool. So I think,
it would have been an NHS stump instead of a
well,
blade,
that's the
though.
thing. It wouldn't have been. Yeah, it would have been a stump. So
Yeah.
it would have been cool. So I think these things, and like brands like Nike and that get behind it. They make it cooler. So then people look at it and go, you know what? Actually, that's really cool. You see people like Jody, what he's done to his prosthetic leg. He paints it and stuff like that.
Special design and stuff.
Special
like this.
design. It's actually cool. So I think Paralympic stuff is becoming more cooler. It becomes more household.
I think
people generally like it.
On the other side of the argument, you do hear some Paralympians saying, I don't want to be known for my story and my struggle. I just want to be known for being an athlete as well.
Yeah.
Like, they call it, is it like sympathy porn or something like that? They
Yeah.
call it. Would be like a term for it or something
Yeah,
like that. We're not just a sorry case who's ill. Like, appreciate for us for a performance. So it kind of goes, it's such a difficult tightrope to walk, because these guys have got amazing stories.
Mhm.
It is going to boost the sport. But you just see where's that divide on where everyone thinks it should go as a sport, I guess.
Yeah, and I think for me, I unfortunately through no fault of my own, I've been defined more by tumours than any performance I've ever done. And I would rather not. I don't want to be that guy that has the tumours, but unfortunately that's what I've got. So I try to make the most of it. But you're right. It's like you start to focus too much on the story, and then you miss the performance.
I'd just say there's no risk of that with Phil. If he was going to write an autobiography, it'd be called Phil Hines: A Life Without Struggle.
And
the other one is why try when it would just happen?
Yeah,
I mean,
he does look like the most relaxed dude I've ever seen.
Because he's offloaded all his stress to me. Like,
you see him at the velodrome, and it's like he's floating almost. And he's almost got no effort to even get to the
do
track.
I need more struggle in my life? Or?
I don't know. Yeah.
He doesn't even have a line on his face.
Just like one of these guys that land on their feet, I guess.
I do stress a lot about a lot of things, but I just offloaded onto Callum.
But he's got his Olympic.
it.
How fast do you do your opening lap?
17:03.
So
Pretty much 16:9 without
16:9, and he's got 2 Olympic golds for 16 seconds worth of.
He does.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the bit.
That's why he has no wrinkles.
I can tell you started to feel sorry for Phil, so we will do the bit where we build him back up.
Yeah.
You're an incredible athlete.
Thank you. I don't know how to take it, but
they did fight. British cycling did struggle to find someone who was fast enough to be behind you, though, didn't they?
they did. Jamie Stuff retired after Beijing,
Yeah.
and then they've been looking for a man one since. And that was I had a chance to come over, give man one a go, and they found me. And the same thing happened after Chris retired in 2012. They're looking for man 3, and then Callum Skinner appeared and filled the spot. So yeah.
Would you say you're the fittest one then, being man 3?
Oh, you have to be. Yeah. Like,
oh, do you?
Yeah, I think still
You're the fittest.
I'm the fittest guy on the road out of anyone in that sprint team.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're not doing the gym anymore.
Yeah, but even before I was fittest.
Yeah, you were.
Anyway,
so going back to the start of your Paralympic career was 2009. Was this actually the first time you started rowing?
Yes, I'd never been in a boat. Did the Paralympic testing day, and so you do all a bunch of tests. You do sprint, power test, lifting, everything. And at the end of the test was a 3-minute row on the ergo. I'd never even been on a rowing machine before. Jumped on, pulled 3 minutes, and loved it. It was back to that suffering thing. Loved it. Threw up. Was lying on the floor thinking this is great fun. This is much better than the power stuff, So I thought I love this. And then a few days later, I got a call from Tom Dyson, who was the British coach sort of that time. He said, "Would you like to come down to Caversham?" So I got in the car from Aviemore, drove down to Caversham, did an hour test, and threw up. And then he was like, "Okay, this is you know what sports like, it's all secretive." So they're like, and he said, this is a decent enough time to come on the team. And then it was like, if you can basically move here in the next few months, that would be great. So yeah, I sort of seen the opportunity and was like, okay, this is a great opportunity. I'm gonna snap it with both hands and give it everything, and moved to Caversham and started rowing. And it's like cycling. It's based at the Olympic team and Paralympic team all trained together. So was based there and started training on, I think it was 17, 18 sessions a week. Trying to get in a boat, learn to boat, learn to become an endurance athlete, learn everything about being in a program that was a lot stricter than just sort of my own little training regime. So it was a big change in lifestyle and everything, but it was an opportunity I'm so glad I took. And
how did you find that transition to, because I know a lot of the Paralympic guys on the GB team sometimes might say to the coaches, like, for fuck's sake, I'm not a kid, you don't need to tell me to be on time. Or like, you don't need to tell me to do this or do that. Like, I'm an adult, I'm like 35 years old, like, give it a rest. Did you adapt to that kind of culture quite well, or was it a little bit tricky?
No, I think there was a few things maybe I struggled a little bit, but my dream was always to go to the forces. I was brought up in that environment, like a strict environment with karate and stuff. So I was very, karate is a very strict sport in that respect. So I was very good at just being told what to do, and I realized there was a few times I had to have maybe a discussion, think, well, okay, that's a little bit strict, but it is hard in Paralympic sport because I guess we're not coming through a program like you guys who come in at a young age, and you have to be obviously kept a little bit of control, where we are, a lot of guys are at it. There was one guy in the Paralympic team, he had come in from Afghanistan, he was an officer, he was in charge of leading guys into war zones. And I remember one day at the table in a training camp, he did something with a spoon, he just wiped on his top and started eating. And one of the coaches freaked out, he's just like, oh, you can't do that, illness, blah, 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 we're out from world championships and stuff. And he was just like, like, wait a minute, don't speak to me like that. I commanded guys in war zones. and if I want to eat the spoon like that. And there was a way to do it. I think the coach handled it wrong. There was a way to say to him, look, actually, this runs a risk of that. So I respected what I was told, and I've always been quite good at just falling in line. But I had a laugh that day when, this officer, double, lost both his legs. And all of a sudden there's some like coach telling them you can't eat with a spoon like that.
And you hear a few bits about how the British rowing system operates, because it obviously it's quite an injury heavy sport from like a back point of view. And you kind of hear a few, not horror stories, but a few stories where they basically start out with, like, let's say it's an 8-man team, they start out with like 50 guys. And whoever survives the training, so you talked earlier about the training being tough. Whoever survives the training, i.e. doesn't break, makes it to the games.
Well, there was always an analogy that I heard that, if you throw 100 eggs at the wall, that basically the eggs that don't smash are going to be Olympic champions.
Oh, really?
And that's only hearsay. I don't know, but the one thing I know is that, that Jürgen is German. He's an amazing coach, and you can't question what he's done in that team. He's won Olympic medals as far, all the way back to the 70s. So whatever he does works. And it definitely works. Yes, there is injuries, but it's a sport where you're in a very close position and you're exposing your body to an acute stress, which then becomes a chronic stress, and that can be pretty challenging. So I think the physios are definitely overworked. There's a physio in the Paralympic team, Pat, who was actually the guy who helped me diagnose my tumor. So I owe a lot to Pat, but he was very good. He worked with a lot of guys at trying to cure the back injuries, and simple things like getting out the boat and just lying on your front and extending the spine so the discs get a chance to be offloaded. Just little things like that reduce the rate of injury. But I think, I remember an Olympic doctor years ago telling me, high performance sport is not good for the body.
No, it's not. Everyone says, oh, you must be healthy. And I'm like, well, I might need a few, I won't because I've come out too early, but you're going to need a few hip replacements, I think.
Yeah, I think so. It's not a good way.
But he's got a good moisturising sponsor.
You are looking fresh today, actually.
He's looking really fresh.
Just had a shower this morning.
So let's talk about the tumor, I guess. So how long was it with being in that system that started to become a concern?
So I remember being in it. We won the World Championships, and then not long after the World Championships, my performances started to really drop. And because everything's monitored, everything's seen, that it was a combination of the physiologist, a girl, Sarah Gilchrist, who was doing her physiology at the time, Pat, who was doing the physio, and then the coaches. They're obviously all talking. At the same time, I was going and seeing my GP, saying that there's things that are not right, and I'd been doing that for almost 9-10 years. But the symptoms were getting worse and worse now. So I was going to my own GP and saying, look, I'm having all these symptoms. So I was doing my own investigation. Sport started their investigation. I think they thought I was going out drinking every night because the performances were so bad, because it didn't make any sense why I couldn't do the training. And we put on a sleep watch, showed I was getting no sleep at all. I was up the whole night, restless.
Was that conscious though, or
So they basically put it on my arm.
I mean, like, were you aware of the fact that you weren't getting any sleep?
No, I thought I was sleeping, but
so it's like a constant, very light, disturbed sleep. I guess.
Yeah. So it wasn't. I was never getting into, I guess, like recovery sleep. Then also I was doing the toilet like 20, 30 times a day. So as these investigations are all going on, I look back and think, why did you not just send me for a scan right away? But scans seem to be the last, almost like, wait, well, hold on. So the first thing they did was they did all these physiological tests, and then I spoke to the doctor, and he says, right, we're going to send you up for a urodynamics. So you guys might not be familiar with urodynamics quite yet, but in 40 years from now, you'll be very familiar with the urodynamics test.
Oh, this sounds like a Kangen water kind of thing. It's like, if you're not on the bandwagon now, you will be.
You will be. And you won't be smiling then. So I travel up to London, do train in the morning, jump on a train up to London. I go into this hospital, and I get put on a gown, and I look along the line, and I'm the youngest guy by like 30 years, and everyone's here, and I was like, what is this test? So I go into this room, there's like a scanning machine, and there's a nurse there, a very cute nurse, and she's like, I'm going to stick this catheter in you.
Shout out to her.
And I was like, wow. And then, so she's trying to get it in, but couldn't get it in. So that's pretty painful.
Yeah.
And then, so basically, then there was a doctor, and he said, okay, I'm going to put this catheter in as well. And I was like, well, where's that catheter going? And it goes in where you wouldn't want it to go in.
Yeah.
So at the same time, I've got this catheter trying to go in the front, and then this other one that goes in the back. And then from there, they fill you up with dye. And then when you're filled up with dye, they then turn you back up, and they scan you, and the dye just empties. So it was pretty a traumatic experience. So when they flipped me back up, the dye all ran out, and then I fainted. And as the dye was running out, I was sort of passing out, and then the catheter started shooting around the room. So I sprayed this nurse with the dye. It was going everywhere. So after all this fiasco, they're like, we have to do the test again. So I was like, you're kidding me. So I had to go through this test again. So that all finished. I got on the train home like I'd been properly beat up. Sat all the way back to Caversham.
Like Keen and Maddie after a night out.
Yeah, it was pretty horrible.
Yeah.
He must be having some wild nights. And then the next day I had to go back for what was known as a flexible Sitopski, which I guess you won't be familiar with either.
But you will be soon.
You will be soon. Actually, it's just down the road. We can go down. Pay some money and get it done. So the next day I went back in, and then I remember being in the waiting room, and this girl said, what are you here for? And I was like, I'm here for this. And she was like, blah, blah. And we had a little bit of small talk, and then went in. And he said, have you ever had this before? I was like, no. He says, do you know what it is? I was like, no. So the next minute he gets like a clamp and goes where the catheter went, clamps me wide open, and then sprays a gel right up in there, and then takes a camera, probably like the thickness of one of these cables, and sticks it right up. And that's pretty painful. And there's a little camera, and it's looking around inside your bladder, because they thought I had bladder issues because I was going to the toilet all the time.
Right.
So never say to a doctor that you're going to the toilet all the time. So that was pretty horrible. And then I went back up to Caversham again in a lot of pain. They said, if you have to do the toilet, you're going to have to sit down to pee for the next sort of day because it's pretty sore.
Yeah.
Yeah, they weren't exaggerating. So then that escalated a bit more. Tests got worse. Then one day I got out the boat, Pat was working on my neck, and he did a very light manipulation, and I wasn't feeling so great, went home, and I fainted. So I phoned them up and said, look, something's not right. And then they thought it might be a bulging disc. It's very common in athletes, that pressure we put in our spines. We'll just send you for a scan. And I went for a scan, completely oblivious to what that was going to open up. And it was like, I guess, opening Pandora's box, and had that scan. And that's when the guy sat there and just held up a little thing and said, this is a tumour. He's like, this is way beyond going on me. I need to recommend you to someone else.
Wow.
And that was the start of what's turned into be 9 years, 6 surgeries, 4 tumours, paralysis, a whole host of things.
So like to a very lesser extent, like, so I don't know if you know this or remember that, but yeah, so I'd effectively got kind of misdiagnosed with lymphoma. So I got the head of A&E to tell me when I was younger, like, you've got cancer. And I think like nothing prepares you for the fact that the floor just like falls away from you completely. Yeah. And luckily it wasn't in the end, even though the consultant said she would have put money on it. We'll discard that.
Yeah.
But like, how you go in there with no expectations and expect to see a disc bulge. Yeah. How do how do you deal with that? That it's just it's just mind blowing, isn't it?
And nothing prepares you for that. And I think what it does is it puts life into perspective. Like we're chasing medals. Phil cycles around in circles to chase medals, and there's this and I think doing all the work with Steve Peters kind of put it beautifully because he said one day to me, he's like, in 100 years from now, no one will care. So, and I was like, oh yeah, that's true. And I think it made me see life for what it really is, and how much we take for granted, and really what you've got to do things that you love. And if you're not loving something, then is it really worth doing it? And because we only get that one chance at life. And it made me realize that you've got to live every day like it's your last. But nothing ever prepares you. I mean, I've had 4 diagnoses now, and they don't get any easier. And from what I was reading yesterday on some of the literature, that I've got this for life. The survival rate is sometimes only 10 years, and I'm at 9 years now. So I know that this is never going to go away. It's always going to be in my body. And that's a pretty hard thing to try, and I don't even know how you begin to even deal with that. You've just got to go and live your life, pretty much. And I live it every 6 months. I get a scan every 6 months, and then I deal with that on that day, and then I just park it, and then get on with my life. And it's a lot of talks with Steve has helped to deal with that. I think if I hadn't had any help from him and some other psychologists, then I would probably be a real mess. And actually, someone said to me the other day, you've got a lot of impressive scars on your neck, but I'm guessing the real scars are inside that no one will ever see. And when he said that, I went away and thought about what he said, and he's incredibly right there, that the scars are when I'm sitting at home on my own, sitting thinking, I've got so much I want to do in life, but actually, am I even going to see in 3 years' time will I even be alive? So you try to make all these plans, and everyone plans, especially in sports, every 4 years when you go to the Olympics, and it's like, everyone gets so stressed about it, and I'm like, well, actually, living's a bit more important.
But fitting that in with the sporting commitments posed a lot of challenges, didn't it? In terms of when to operate, when not to operate, all that kind of stuff. So how did that start transpiring when you had that diagnosis? I guess were you still as kind of, because I guess if someone gets a life-changing bit of news like that, there's 2 reactions. You can take it all in and basically just be understandably a bit of a wreck for a little while, or you can put the blinkers on and keep going.
I think I probably put the blinkers on. I think I went through what's known as the Kruger-Ross stages of grief. So I've permanently been stuck in denial for 9 years, and I maybe go into a little bit of depression and back to denial. I've never really accepted it because I don't feel ill. I've never really had any symptoms. I don't really look ill, and I've just thought, well, actually, there's nothing really wrong with me. And when I see the scans, I'm kind of like, really? And I know the last surgery I had, the tumor was like the size of a golf ball, and I sent it to the Mayo Clinic in America, the scans, and the doctor phoned me up and he's like, can you send a picture of you standing? So I sent him a photo of me just riding across the Grandes Alps on my bike. And he's like, no, I need a recent photo. I said, that's like 3 days ago. And he's like, you're standing? You're riding a bike? And he's like, all my patients are like lying flat, paralyzed. He says, how is this possible? This is not possible. He said, I've never seen anything like this in my life. And I was like, well, I kind of don't think I'm ill. And I don't know how much of that's got an overriding effect on dealing with it. But I've kind of just had the blinkers on and thought, you know what? I don't want to be defined. I don't want it to define me, and it's never held me back in life. So I'm just going to keep pushing on. And I think I try to find now things I can do and just focus on them: riding my bike, swimming, going to the gym, doing stuff like that. So sport's been it's kept me sane. It's given me a purpose. So
it's really funny. We talked about sport not being a healthy pursuit, but I think actually when it comes to stuff like surgeries and treatments and stuff like that, athletes always come back. I don't know for what reason, whether it's fitness or conditioning or mindset, but athletes always seem to come back quicker, far quicker than general public or anything like that.
And I've had athletes say to me, like guys with Olympic medals and that, I could never go through what you've gone through. And I was like, you'd be surprised. I'm pretty confident you would.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty confident if anyone that I know in an Olympic team got diagnosed with what I got, they would deal with it exactly the same as me.
Because it took you only 6 months after the first diagnosis to actually come back to rowing, didn't it?
Yeah. So the first diagnosis, they cut me through the front of the neck, removed in the vertebrae, cut into the dura, the spinal cord, removed the tumor, put me together, sent me home. I had a blood clot. Almost died at home. I was rushed back into hospital, and I remember getting rushed back in.
My favorite story I heard on the other podcast that actually you didn't want to phone the ambulance.
Yeah, I didn't want to phone the ambulance. I didn't want to make a scene, so I was kind of like, I'm on the Myers-Briggs things. I'm an INFJ, so I'm quite like, I just kind of want to like, don't want to make a fuss about things. So I keep quite quiet. And I was like basically dying in my bed. And my mum was like, let's phone an ambulance. I was like, no, don't phone an ambulance. Phone my mate.
That was a proper Glasgow Jakey accent.
Yeah, it was.
No, I don't want it.
Didn't call the ambulance. Like, just get me a bottle of Iron Brew, I'll be fine. So my mate came and picked me up and flung me in the car, and we just chatted. It was weird. We chatted about, he's a ski journalist, so we chatted about skiing the whole way to the hospital. And I remember getting to the hospital and like collapsed in a wheelchair. And then I can't really remember much more than that, except that I pooed myself when they were transmitting me from the wheelchair to the hospital bed. I remember like pooing everywhere and peeing everywhere and kind of like saying, I'm sorry. But my whole body had just like let go. And then that was a blood clot. And if I hadn't got to hospital in that time, I would have died. So they had to do another surgery, which then left me in hospital for a month. And then I left hospital, went through all the rehabilitation, and I was back in a boat in 6 months after, and then won the world championships 14 months after that sort of escapade.
14 months.
14 months after. And again, sport doesn't wait for you. So I had trials 11 months after that, and it was 15 flat out 1,000 meter races at Caversham. I had erg tests and everything. I remember the very first erg I got on, I had to do 16K on the rowing machine, and the coach was brutal. She was basically like, you're not getting off until you do it. And that might sound like a bit of tough, like people might be, oh, Jesus, this guy's just coming out of hospital. But actually I needed that. And what Mary did at that point might have been perceived as brutal, but actually I thrived in that. I loved it, and I thought, okay, it was an horrendous 16K, but if I hadn't done that 16K that day, then I wouldn't have gone on to win the worlds and go to London. And I thought that was it. I thought, I've had my turn. I've had my tumour. I was almost 3.5 years clear before the next scan cropped up. And then that's when I transferred to cycling. And unfortunately, my whole cycling career has been plagued with tumours. Pretty much every year.
Can we try and explain as to why? Because I guess if we're talking about let's call it a standard case of a tumour, it's cut out and then that's it. But because it's in the neck, there's so many more added complications, isn't there?
Yeah. So it's in spinal cord at C4, C5 area of the spinal cord. So in the cervical spine, it sits on the nerve root to the lungs. So if it's left and it's not operated on, it'll grow so big that it'll basically cut off all the nerve supply. You stop breathing, you would become paralysed and die. It's called a hemangiopersitoma, and there's not much research on them. They're only account for 1% of all spinal tumours, so it's hard to find any sort of like what's the prognosis of it. I think from what I've gathered, the best form of treatment is surgery followed by post-operative radiotherapy, and that was something I never received. I never got any radiation, and it just kept recurring basically. And you obviously you think you remove all of it through a microscope, but there's lots of blood, there's lots of things going on in the spinal cord, so you remove as much as you think is safe. Then you put the person back together and you fix the spine, you fix all the joints. And when I look at the MRIs now and I look in here, it's a real mess. And you kind of hope that it's not going to come back. And unfortunately, the way the cell goes through what's known as the cell cycle, when the cells multiply and copy, it just copies the DNA of that cell, which is a rogue cell, and then it just starts to grow again. So as quick as they were taking that tumour out, it was growing straight back.
Okay, yeah. And the recovery process after having a surgery like that was almost indefinitely pretty traumatic as well.
Yeah.
Like, I remember that we've spoken a couple of times when you've had recovery or whatever, and yeah, like sometimes you've woken up with partial paralysis and all that kind of stuff, and basically bedbound for months. Months and months.
Yeah. It's horrendous. And it's funny, when I went through the first time, I remember saying to myself, I could never go through this again. Like, literally, and this is why I know people like Olympians could fight this, because I say like, there's no way I could go through that again. Then you get diagnosed again, and you know what's coming, and you think, oh my God, I'm going to have to go through all that again. So the second time was during the Commonwealth Games, actually in Glasgow, where I was doing the ambassador role. And I remember flying down, being told I needed this surgery again. They were going to cut me down through the back of the neck the second time. So I went back in after the Commonwealth Games for that surgery, and they cut down through the back of the neck. I woke up again, partial paralysis. Even just trying to sit up, you lose all your muscle. You lose literally 10, 15 kilos of muscle in a week's gone. So you look down at your legs and they're literally like little sticks. You can't stand. Your whole body, as soon as they go into the spinal cord, it just causes a cascade of problems. So then you're in a real mess. So then you have to learn to get on a wheelchair. You're in hospital for 10 days, and you go home. Then you're in bed for months. Then you have to learn to like just gently walk. Then get back on the turbo, and then before you know it, and I think after the second surgery, it was 3 months. I managed to get back on a bike, and then 6 months after that, I went and did the Vaughan 2 3 times up Vaughan 2 in one day. And then 7 months, I was back racing for Britain again in a time trial. And I thought, that's it. I could never go through that again. And then literally, as I was doing all my rehab, the tumour was already starting to grow. So little did I know that I was going to, because I had my sights, I thought it was like a curse of the games. So I thought, well, it was 2 years before London and I made it. This is 2 years before Rio. I thought, oh, yeah, maybe history can repeat itself fully. And then, yeah, just going into that Rio year, I was re-diagnosed again. And that surgery was hell. That recovery, that's the one that really probably changed my life and scarred me, because that was the surgery that paralysed me.
But you were considering delaying treatment if it meant you could get to Rio, were you?
Yeah, I had those conversations with him, because I sort of said, how long, what's the speed of it growing? Is it, because I know I'm going to end up in surgery at some point. Is it growing really fast or really slow? And we see where we can monitor it. So initially we monitored it for a little bit, and then it was growing so fast. They were like, there's no point, because you ain't going to be able to produce the power, because the more you go into the position, your neck turns up, it presses, and you cut off all the nerve supply. So you won't make the performance levels. So you won't even probably make the team. And then obviously then you're going to end up in surgery. So the best bet is to have surgery early, get rehabbed, and then, aim for future world champs and maybe Tokyo. Little did I know, I went into that surgery. It was a 10-hour surgery. It was very aggressive. And I woke up with, it wasn't partial paralysis this time. I couldn't move anything down the whole left side. And I spent 8 weeks in the neuro ward, just lying, looking at the roof, which was an horrendous experience, because I heard people getting diagnosed with brain tumors, told they're only got months to live, because they just shut the curtain. And the guy's waiting for him. They say, "Oh, actually, we've done your scans. You have a brain tumor. You're going to basically got 3 months to live." And then they put the curtain back, and I'm like, "Hey, how are you doing, mate?
What are you having for lunch?"
Yeah, what are you having for lunch? Yeah, let's get lunch in. So I had this for like 8 weeks. And then
because you were sharing the ward with like 6 other guys.
Yeah. So you're in there. There was a guy in there who'd been stabbed in the neck and all sorts of stuff. So you're in this neuro, you're not really getting any sleep, and you're seeing people at their worst. I mean, I seen one guy take his last breath. That was him. He was dying, and that stuff scars you. But I always think that people are scared to talk about death. They don't want to talk about death. But actually, if you're aware of death, does it make you live your life differently today? And actually, because we've all got an expiration date in our foreheads, we're all going to die. But people get a bit freaked out when you say that, but it's true. And if you're aware of that, it actually makes you live your life differently. I don't spend that much time flipping through screens and Instas and all this stuff, because I'm actually like, I actually want to go out and live, because I've seen the end of life, and it's not very pretty. So actually, by seeing that, I can see it as a bit of a gift, really, because it's almost woken me up.
So some people talk about almost like a out-of-body experience when they have major surgeries, major medical events, where they actually think that they got pretty close to that point, and then they get pulled back. Was that ever something that you experienced? Because I guess that's where some people gain that perspective on life, or was that more from the psychologists and stuff like that? Yeah,
I just seen other people. Other people, and then when I had that third surgery, I was 8 weeks in the neuro ward. Then I went to Stoke Mandeville for my rehabilitation, and that's a really tough place to be, because you're seeing a lot of people who got up to work in the morning, and then they wake up in a spinal injury hospital, paralysed from the neck down. And the day they wheeled me there, they wheeled me in, and I was parked next to a young lad in his 20s, and he had the tube coming out of his lungs, and he was breathing through the tube, paralysed completely from the neck down, couldn't talk. All he could do was move his eyes. And I was sat opposite him for a good 20 odd minutes, just sitting looking at him in my wheelchair, looking at him going, God, that could be me, because that's the height of my tumour. And I'm looking at this young kid going, Jesus, what happened to him? And it's quite funny when you're in Stoke Mandeville, because you wheel around, everyone's wheeling around in their wheelchairs, like 150 spinal patients, and you roll up to someone and you're like, what are you in for? It's like being in prison almost.
I was going to say, there must be a solidarity element to it as well. Like, as much as there's the negatives with sleeping and being involved in other people's cases. Everyone's in the same boat.
You're in the same boat. So you kind of gravitate to people who are similar personalities to you. There's people who give up, and then there's people who really fight it. So I ended up with an ex-army guy and a rugby player. and we became real good mates. And, because we were like similar mindset, and a girl as well who was in there, we all kind of got on really well because we were all like wanting to fight it. But you wheel up to somebody and what are you? And they'll be like, oh, I'm a incomplete Asia D. And that's what you become known as that. And I remember sitting in my first like team meeting in there, and they said to me, what's your dreams and goals? And I was like, well, I want to ride across the Alps, and I want to ride for Great Britain again. And they're like, well, I think we should probably start off with it. Let's just see if you can brush your teeth on your own. And I was like, we're not going to get on. And I became the patient from hell because I was like an athlete mind.
I think Vicky had a similar thing though as well, because they were like the same kind of conversation, and they were like, we'll see if we can get you walking. And she was like, no, my end goal is back on the bike.
Yeah. And
competitively. Exactly.
And if those doctors were looking at Vicky at that point, they're not looking at who Vicky is. They're just looking at this injured person lying there. And I think that's really bad, because they should be looking at Vicky like, okay, this girl's a world-class athlete. We'll treat her like that, and we'll say, right, if that's your end goal, we're going to support it. And there's the big thing. If you go to America to do your rehab, that's what they're like over there. You're like, you want to run a marathon? Okay, we'll find a way. Where over here, I felt it was a bit more like, well, this is your wheelchair, this is your new life. And they don't realize when you're dealing with someone like Vicky and her mindset, which she's proven to everyone, she just needed the time.
Yeah.
But if you went to some of her doctors who said that now and show her now, they'd be like, wow.
So in terms of coping strategies with like fellow patients and stuff like that, I almost feel as if having dealt or having kind of knowing a lot of Paralympic athletes and stuff, especially like the army veterans who have got like amputees, their humor gets pretty dark.
Yeah.
Like there's almost like nothing off limits, I guess.
Yeah.
Did that become a bit of a coping mechanism? Because it sounds like when you're talking about a rugby player and army guy, nothing's going to be off limits.
No. We had lots of humor, and again, it's like humor is if you look at resilience, humor is one of the big characteristics of having resilience. So the army guy, he was paralyzed from the neck down. He couldn't really use his arms. And we used to sit like Mars bars on his chest, and he'd be going like this, trying to get the Mars bar, and people would be like, "You can't do that." And we're like, "Yeah, of course, it's a diet. It's Frank's diet, and this is good for Frank."
Yeah, this is good for Frank. I say that about Phil all the time.
This is good for Phil. So people see that and they're like, "Jesus!" So, but there is this humor. And one of the other big humors is around pooing. Pooing becomes a big thing in hospital. So I was actually the only guy that wasn't getting a suppository in Stoke Mandeville. And I remember in the morning, I'd hear all the guys screaming. I'd hear Frank going, "Ah!" And then it'd go to Mark, and I'd be like, and Mark would go, "Ah! You've just ripped my..." So that becomes like a big thing, the humor side of things.
Yeah.
And, you all have these poo stories and stuff. And I didn't realize how bad it was until I'd spent all that time in hospital. And my friend, Dave Inman, came to pick me up and take me back to his house. And I always stayed at his house after surgery. And on the Friday night, he had a bit of a dinner party. So I came downstairs to the dinner party, only 4 days out of hospital in my pajamas, a complete mess, couldn't share. I was like, oh. And I sat at the dinner, and I had nothing to talk about. Bar, poo stories, suppositories, like torture and Frank. And I realized that people didn't really get it, because I would say, well, what we did to Frank. And, and they were like, disgusted, but I actually like the military guys. It becomes this it's a coping mechanism.
I'm not going to put Mars bars in Frank's chest anytime soon. But I think there's a bit of an athlete mindset where it's like, you're always going to face hardships or even like results or whatever. And a good way to deal with that is humor. It's what you said about resilience. It makes sense.
Yeah.
But I guess what I want to talk about was we met at the Scottish Sports Awards a while ago, and that was super emotional for everyone involved, because you disclosed that you'd been the tumor had come back again. But what's more, all the recoveries and the rehabs had been so horrific and traumatic that you were actually considering not going through that again.
That was pretty tough, simply because the 2016 one was so bad that definitely psychologically scarred me. And then when I was re-diagnosed in 2017, they started to find the tumor. They didn't tell me. They sent me an email on a Friday night with a histology report. And in the histology report, it said, you might find this interesting. And it said 2 nodules. And I was like, what's a nodule? And then I realized, that's tumor. And I thought, well, this is going to grow back. It has every time. So there's going to be no different this time. So right enough, I go through the whole of 2017, whole of 2018. It comes back. It's massive. But I'm not going to that hospital for my surgery now. I found a new hospital, but I had to find a new surgeon, new hospital. So that was a pretty stressful process. And I almost went into denial. I was like, I can't go through this. And I was speaking to all these different surgeons in America, and they're like, yeah, we can get this out, but you'll be paralyzed from the neck down. You'll be on a breathing tube the rest of your life. You'll be in a wheelchair, but we can save your life. And I was like, I don't want to live just as a head. So I had all these emotions going on, and the hospital that had the paralysis at, they offered me psychological support, but didn't give it to me. So they said, I broke down in tears with the surgeon in that room, and he said, I can get you support, but I never received that support. So I was kind of dealing with my own. And then I left that hospital that day, and I John Dogg phoned me from the Commonwealth Games. He said, are you coming tonight? And I was like, look, I can't. Like, I'm like literally just been told that I'm going to die basically if I don't have this surgery. And if I have the surgery, I'm going to become a head. Like I don't have a surgeon. I can't come. And he was like, oh, well, we kind of need you to come. And because he says, you got an award. And actually going that night was the greatest thing. Okay. And I'm glad he said, look, because he said, look, you've won an award. You're not giving out an award, you've won an award. And I remember thinking, all right, I'll come. And I'm glad I did, because I went up there, and that's how the column started as well in the Herald, because I sat next to Stuart Fisher, who was the sports journalist from the Herald. We got speaking away, and he said he'd love to do something. But that night, it was special. It was a pretty special and emotional night for me, just to be, like, you win medals, and you never do sport to get recognized with these awards, and then when someone you actually win an award like that, it was actually quite special for me to go that night. But it was tough emotionally, because I knew I was going to have to leave there and go back and face reality, and that was like an escape from reality. But I knew the next morning I had to fly back to London and go and sit and have some pretty serious conversations.
And I guess kind of final question on that whole kind of tumour story before, well, we'll come in later, but before we find out, what's in the future, what's going on now, would be, I guess, was one of the reasons that night was special because you almost felt like that was an extended support network.
Yeah.
And what's more, like, what has your support network been like? And did you accept? You obviously don't seem like the kind of guy that accepts help very easily, given that your mate took you to hospital and in the passenger seat of a car.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how useful that's been, and maybe how it came about as well?
Yeah, that was because I've always never seen myself as I just wanted to be an athlete. I just wanted to do sport, and I love being around sport. I love being around other athletes. So, I love hearing other people's stories and stuff, and love seeing other people succeed. That's one thing I've always enjoyed. And I always had that running joke with Steve Bate that when I met him, his life went up. My life has come crashing down. But I've enjoyed watching his success along the road. So having that network and the teammates and in cycling's been great, but then extending it to the whole of Scottish sport, it was really nice. And you kind of feel that you're going into surgery, and you get all these nice messages from people that actually you're not alone. And you think, like, it gives you, when you're in your darkest hours lying in ICU at like 3 a.m, and you're watching the guy next to you who's basically dying, and you're in agony. After I went through 2 surgeries in UCLH this time, and there was 2 days I couldn't open my eyes. I was just lying. I was in the ICU for ages, and you get a message from somebody, training's going well, or you kind of like takes you away from that world, and you can almost live your life through someone else kind of thing. But then you also feel you're getting support. And I remember the day I flew back down, I had to go for an angiogram. I remember having an angiogram, and then Chris was down with Sarah, and they were messaging, where are you? I was like, well, I've had an angiogram a couple of days. I'm just about to get released from hospital. And he's like, oh, we're staying here. So I came out of hospital, jumped in the car, and went around and had a coffee with him and Zara, and he said, at that point, that's when he says, are you speaking to anyone? And I was like, well, not really. I'm just kind of trucking on my own. He's like, do you know Steve Peters well? And I was like, well, I've read his book and stuff. I've never worked with him. He's like, look, let me give Steve a phone. So Chris went and phoned Steve, and then Steve called me that night, and I had half an hour on the phone with him, and it completely changed everything. Like, literally, I was like, I came off the phone thinking, wow, what happened there? Didn't even know it had happened. But I was like, that was incredible. And that if I hadn't had that call, I'm pretty confident I couldn't have got through surgery. So having that support network, like I tend not to ask for help, but if it arises, then I will take it. And that call that night with Steve was phenomenal. And Steve was actually in London at one point. He came along to the house and seen me, and how are you dealing with this? How are you coping? And we had a little conversation. And again, I think if I hadn't had those 2 conversations with him, I wouldn't have been able to cope through this time. This time was so hard to have the angiogram, which is brutal. They stick basically like pipe through your femoral artery and feed it right up into you. So that was a general anesthetic. Then I had cut through the back of the neck, one surgery. A few days later, I was cut again to go back in and remove it again. And then the whole of December in bed. Then I was rushed into A&E with headaches, and then I got through all of that and then went straight into radiation. I was in radiation, every day for 6.5 weeks. There was guys I was in radiation with who, they've not survived now. You see young kids as young as 2-3-year-old in radiation. So to get through all of that, I think the reason I've got through it and I'm still relatively sane is because of my sport network and having mates. And
I think that's something that Steve really tries to push is like, I think he makes no bones about the fact that, he's got a pretty level-headed view of death and he's like, I'm not going to be here forever.
Yeah.
So I think one of his main bits is trying to make you resilient and independent enough to survive without him.
Yeah.
Because when I was in a dark place, I effectively fell into his arms, I guess. He kind of really looked after me.
Well, he looked after you when you were diagnosed, weren't you? He was.
Well, yeah. Well, it was a funny story though, because he told me I didn't have cancer. He was the only guy who did.
Yeah.
And then when I had depression and I went to go and see him, I wanted him to say the same thing. I wanted him to say, man up with it.
Yeah. Get
on with it.
Yeah.
And he didn't. He said, you're very unwell and you need help.
It's funny how you went there looking for him to say, you almost wanted an answer like, I'm okay, I'm not depressed.
I had a proper savior mentality. I didn't think I was ill. Same kind of thing. Denial, push on, fuck this. I've got a World Cup next week or something.
Yeah, just get on with it.
But I think the Scottish angle is quite a nice one as well, because I think around about that time, it was the same time that Stephanie Ingalls had her motorbike accident in Vietnam.
Yeah. And
that was a crowdfunding page. We managed to get her support to come back to Scotland and all that kind of stuff. So there is a proper little community there of guys that, I didn't realise it until now, but it must have actually felt quite special to be part of that. So so looking forward now, where do we sit today?
Jesus, okay, I just want to live now. It's hard because in 2 days' time I go for a scan, so I'm living these two lives, and it's like flipping a coin. If it lands heads, I'm alive. If it lands tails, I could be facing more surgery. It's literally like that. So every day, flip a coin and try and live the best life. Then you obviously have the pressure of sport. British Cycling have sent me some pretty hard targets that I've got to ride a medal winning time by November. Which is I'm not even really riding at the moment. I'm doing little bits, but not amazing. So I go away to Europe on Saturday morning to go and do a 3-4 week training camp to try. I'm going to give it a go. I think it's my personality to give it a go. Do I think it's achievable? Probably not. But I'll give it my best shot. And then I'm probably only really giving it a go because I get a hit out in Glasgow. And that's come back to Scotland, and it doesn't really matter what happens there. I get maybe to ride in Glasgow at the
Do you
World
stress
Cup.
about these kind of things, trying to make the team, or do you just
not really? If I'm being brutally honest, and this might sound wrong because I do care about it, but in one way I don't care about it because I've sat in these rooms and been told that you're going to die, this is going to happen to you. So I have this bigger picture of life, and then we're again doing stuff with Steve Peters is like, well, you know what, it's no one's died. Because so when you told you have to exit the program, no one's actually, I'm not being told I've got another tumor.
Because for me, reading your blogs and stuff, I think it's probably for the wrong reasons, but for me, I feel like when I stress about my performance on the track, you feel like you're in the bubble. You're all you stress about is your performance or am I resting well enough? But then reading your blogs and stuff, you think, fuck, there's more to life. Could happen to anyone. And I took a step back, looking at my performance, think, nothing happens if you not do this time.
No one dies.
Session. There's worse things that can happen. So I think for my cycling performance, probably for the wrong reasons, but your blogs and stuff really helps.
So now you're going 5 times slower in training.
But not stress about it as much.
And the price has gone up to 40 quid.
So now I think it's right. So when I get told this stuff, I'm kind of like, well, okay, I'm going to try. I'm going to give it 100%, but I'm also I know I've got a scan on Friday morning, and then I know that I'm basically living two lives. I'm living life as a patient, and I'm living life as an athlete, and both of those are intertwined, and they always will be. Even if I'm 10 years clear, there's still a chance. But we all have a chance of getting cancer or tumors. It's not no one's worried, but I just try not to think about it. But I don't get stressed about the performance side of things because it is only sport. No one's died.
If it's not stress, is there a frustration angle that it's a 3-month target? And I guess to most people that doesn't seem like a long time. I read in one of your columns that, if you were going to target the Road World Championships, like you're talking about a year and a half's worth of training.
Yeah.
And that's true.
Yeah.
Like minimum.
Yeah, minimum, yeah.
Like, it takes so long to build that up.
Yeah.
So 3 months is a big ask.
Yeah. And
not from a stress position, but from a frustration point of view.
And that's one thing I sat with Nigel and spoke about it. And he says, how are you psychologically? Can you deal with the pressure of having a 3-month target? Because if I was on the Olympic program and I was told I had 3 months left, if I didn't hit a target, that would be pretty stressful. But because I'm dealing with something so much bigger than that, it's not really stressful for me, because the biggest stress for me is Friday morning lying in UCLH, being injected with all these chemicals, stuck in a scanning machine for an hour, and then seeing oncology, then seeing a surgeon, and being back in a cancer setting. That's way more stressful than sitting in a performance room in British cycling being told you have 3 months to hit so many watts. I'm like, well, if I don't hit the watts, then I just go and find something else to do in life. But if the tumor meetings go wrong, then you're back in hospital, you're back in surgery, you're back, is radiation an option? I could generally die in that option. And that takes off the stress. I still want to perform and I'll give it everything and I'll try my hardest. And yeah, I'll be disappointed if I don't make it. But I think I can put it in perspective and say, well, actually, no, I'm not died.
Are you partially still in the mindset where you think you would consider not getting any further treatment because it would become too traumatic, or are you back in this mindset of always get better, always push on?
I think now that I've found an amazing surgeon, Professor Choi at UCLH, and I'm under the care of oncology for the first time in 9 years, I trust them and I know they're amazing. And I think any help I can get from them, I will take, if it's going to keep me alive. And also the medical world's moving at such a rate with genetics and all sorts of stuff that I actually truly believe at one point in my life, I'm going to regain use of my leg and my arm and I'll be tumor free. I literally believe that. And I'd say I'm more passionate about that than I am sport. Like I just want to live. And that means I can still go ride my bike, do whatever I want to do. I just don't line up and compete. But competitive sport comes to an end for everyone. I'm 41 now, so I'm like, like it does come to, and I've had I can't complain. I've had a pretty decent life.
I read the story the other day that they started some stem cell treatment and someone actually regained like their legs again, and he was paralyzed.
Yeah. So the stem cell stuff is amazing. There's a whole lot of stuff coming out, especially out of the lot of stuff that Harvard are doing genetics over there, that I believe in our lifetime, that I hope in my lifetime anyway, that cure will be there. And I hold on to that more. Like I would give away everything in my life if I could wake up tomorrow morning and be stacking shelves somewhere and have all my health, I would. Literally, I would give away my gold medal. I don't care for it if I could have my health back. And that's one thing. Health is so, and it's one thing we all take for granted. Like even just your breathing. No one thinks about how they breathe. They just do it, and not until you get told actually you have a tumor sitting there that's going to cut off your breathing and you're going to die. Then you think about it. The 3 month target is pretty tough. But British Cycling have been great to me. They've supported me through 3 of my 4 tumors, and I guess that conversation had to come at some point.
Super physical healthcare they have there.
And it's great support. And I think for me, it's everything in life is about perception, and I could perceive it and be angry and want to blame someone and say, oh, this 3 months is terrible, blah blah blah. I need a year and a half to get into shape.
I think actually that wouldn't be irrational though.
But it wouldn't
be. Steve probably's told you this a lot of time. Is like, consider how a normal person would deal with the circumstances you're facing.
Yeah.
And you can take a lot of pride from that, I guess, as well. It's like, and it sounds like you're totally in control, moving forward, looking up to new projects and all that kind of stuff.
I've got a plan B, a plan C that will all unravel. If plan A goes well, then I ride the time and I go to World Champs next year, that's great. But if it doesn't, plan B, and I'll see. But my main thing and my main dream is just to be tumor, just not have a tumor. And I guess, no fault of my own. I've never really been able to train in cycling. I always get myself through rehab, get myself really fit, do a couple of races, then I'm diagnosed again. And I guess it's a high performance program, so in the brute reality of it, they're there to win medals, not support, not to keep me alive.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I genuinely think that we wish you all the best in terms of like, I don't think it's an irrational to believe to think that you'll get better. I think it's going to be the thing that keeps pushing you on, and I think, you know, there's no light or long way to kind of deal with that kind of stuff. I guess it's like.
Yeah, you can't even like there's days I tried to process it in my mind, and I think it's too much. It's just too overwhelming to you could become consumed by it. So every thought all day is about like tumors, life, paralysis. You're dealing with the tumor, the paralysis in the sport. Where actually, you know what, I'm just like let's just focus on the good things.
Well, let's do that.
Not get stressed.
Good point.
Let's focus on Phil.
I see some amazing. So I want to hear about like what life is like for you, because obviously you're not training kind of full time and all that kind of stuff. You're going to give it a go next week and all that kind of stuff. You know, it seems like you're kind of taking up the speaking circuit, doing a lot of kind of columns. You're off to Jamaica, which I'm incredibly jealous of quite a lot. Yeah. Doing bits and pieces with Nike. Like, what's your kind of day to day? Like, forget about the tumor stuff. What's the day to day?
It's kind of I think it's like, I've just tried to make the best opportunities. So when something comes along, it comes along. The column was great. It only really, with the first chat with the Herald, it was like this is a little 4-week column. I think I'm on week 23 or 24 now, and it gets a lot of good feedback, and I really enjoy it. It gives me a purpose. I think in life, if we have a purpose, then it's easy to focus on the good stuff. So yeah, I spend most of the time writing. I do some speaking as well, which is always rewarding, but it's also tiring because you're having to relive.
Yeah,
you're having to relive everything. So it's a lot of energy, a lot of passion. Some people think, oh, you know, you just come and talk for 40 minutes or an hour, but you don't. You relive your whole life, which for everyone is pretty tiring. The Nike thing is great. That came along for a good friend of David Daly, who used to work for Nike, looked after the Manchester United account, and he was at Nike for 30 odd years. He's a really good friend of mine. And you know, he took me into the office one day, and I sat and met Richard Callaway and Dan Smith, who were sort of looking at after my Nike stuff at that point, and they were just like, you know, Dave just like, tell your story. So I told my story, and at the end of it, Richard was like, "Why? How would you like to be part of the Nike family?" And I was like, "Are you kidding?" Absolutely. What does that get? Like a pair of trainers or something? Yeah. And then you know that is just growing. And there's a girl now, actually, who's an ex-track cyclist for Ireland, Jen Riley. She rode for Ireland. She now looks after the Nike stuff for me. So I'm always up. I got their offices in Soho. So anytime I'm in town, I go up and have meetings with those guys, go and hang out in the Nike office in Soho. And obviously I get, you know, lots of nice kit to wear. And, you know, so that's really cool to go from, you know, being working with one of the biggest brands in the world is an honor. And however long that lasts. And, you know, I'm just grateful for that opportunity. So that's really cool. So I try to do stuff for them. And then, I love Jamaica. And, you know, and I'm not going to deny it.
I'm pretty sure that's a quote out of The Office. But
yeah. So I love going there. You know, every time I go there, I go for maybe 12 days, and then I end extending my flight to the point now. Like the last time I was there, I hired a car and I was driving around. I've got all my mates there. I'm almost like a local now. I know Ricky the Rasta, who's got his own little beach bit. Ricky's great. You know, the guy's 90, looks 40. He looks, you know, he's aged like Phil, you know, really well. But he has no teeth, and he's got his sitting there smoking his joint, and that guy has no stress. You know, so when I sat and, you know, where Ricky, you know, he doesn't care that Phil rides, you know, 16.9 for the first time. He's just sitting there watching the sun go down every day and rise, you know,
no worries.
And no worries. And that's kind of what I thought. I mean, this is puts it into perspective. You know, you see Usain Bolt dipping around, and I can see why Usain chooses to live there, because it's just so chilled. No one bothers him. And it's a great place. It's honestly, the food's great, the people are great. And I've pretty much, kind of like adopted Jamaican citizenship almost.
Nice. There you
go.
go.
Yeah, I love it there. You know, and when you go there on holiday, people say to you, "Oh, you know, don't leave the complex. It's dangerous." Blah 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 blah. You know what? Like, I'm driving through like Barbican and all these areas where the tourists like, "Dude, never drive through Barbican." I'm driving through there with my shirt off. It's a white dude, you know, in a little beat up car, and no one bothers me. You know, like it's an amazing experience. And if you've never been, I'm going to live there at some point. So you guys are.
Nice.
We can do like a Jamaican.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Come on straight away.
I'll give you a quick warning where so when we went on holiday to Rio de Janeiro, Phil hates the favelas. He gets very nervous the entire time.
You hear these horror stories which kind of true.
Does he get nervous in London though? Like, you have to
Yeah,
look
he
after
does.
him.
Yeah, we were talking about that. He won't go on the tube by himself unless he's escorted and stuff like that.
It's not because I fear danger.
No, you do fear danger. You hate danger. You hate this.
So he wouldn't leave the complex then. If we went to Jamaica, he would want to stay in sandals.
Oh, he'd love it. Yeah, and
He'd
for him, that would be a cultural experience.
It's all not true.
It is. Anyway, so David, thanks very much for coming on. If guys want to keep up with your story, obviously you've got the column in the Herald.
Yeah.
If you can't find it, Google Scottish Herald, and that tends to help with Google.
Yeah.
But if people want to follow you on social media, what are your
I tend not to really use it too much, but I am on Instagram.
Yeah.
I think I put it back to David Smith MBE, because the lady who's looking after my social, who's going to help me, said you have to put the MBE on. And I was like, oh, okay. So I had some hidden name, but and then I've got a website, but it's mostly the Herald stuff that I tend to. I'm a bit old. I don't really understand how social works.
Are you thinking of writing a book in the future?
Yeah, that was a big talk with the Herald. We had a big discussion about if we write the column, hopefully that would lead into a book. And there's also the possibility. I'm working with a guy at the moment about pitching to Netflix. A documentary. So we've had some initial talks, and they're making a trailer at the moment that will hopefully maybe be captivated by Netflix or something.
Any ideas for filming locations? Jamaica probably.
Yeah.
Jamaica. Well, the fact that they're filming Bond was filming in Ocho Rios when I was there, and now he's back in Aviemore, so maybe I'll just like follow his. I'm not, if it helps people, then I'll do it. I'm not really.
That's probably my final question. Is like, is going through this story again and again, is it a chore, or do you find? I certainly have gained a lot from your story. I'm sure Phil has, and everyone else does as well.
Yeah.
Is that almost cathartic in a way?
I think for me, I kind of realized it's maybe my purpose in life. I sat down with some sort of person who reads the horoscopes and stuff, and they said, see it as a gift. Like, everyone tries to search their whole life for a purpose. And this is your purpose. Maybe it is to help people and see people. This is how they should live their life, and make the most of it. So for me, I love seeing the guys going on and winning. I remember watching the World Championships from the track, from my hospital bed, and watching the guys, perform and thinking, wow, that's really cool. And yeah, if my story can help people, then it's kind of why I do it. I don't want to do all that. I don't really get all that celebrity world, but I don't really want to be part of that. But if a book and a Netflix things just makes the world a better place, and for people just to be a bit nicer to people and smile and just actually enjoy their life, if that can do that, then I'm willing to go through all the shit of surgeries to make that possible. Because, and Steve told me this as well, because I come out in London and struggle, because I'm like, well, people should be happy. Why are people not smiling? And he's like, well, they could be happy, not replace should with could. And I realized that actually, okay, people sometimes just get caught up in the crap of life, especially with all this Insta thing. How many likes you got? How many follow? And then all these different apps that make you look different than what you actually look like, and how that drives mental health and all this different stuff. And I'm like, well, this is real life. All this stuff you see there is not real life. And if I can bring a little bit of reality into it that helps people live better, then that for me, that's kind of maybe my purpose and what I can contribute to make the world a better place. And I guess in the motto of the All Blacks is you get the shirt, and if you can leave the shirt in a better place, and when you get it, then you've done your job. And it's kind of maybe how I try to live my life.
Well, that's an amazing note to end on. Thank you very much, Dave.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'm sure we all wish you the best going forward. And Phil already keeps up with the columns. I did a bit of frantic research last night, and I will be looking at them from now on.
I can't believe you're not reading them. You're Scottish, come on.
How many podcasts have you listened to?
Quite a lot. All of them.
Okay, don't make me feel worse.
All of them. I've listened to them all. And I love them. And I don't really have a favourite one, but I've liked them all for their own little different bits. And yeah, so I've listened to all your podcasts.
Oh God, I feel like a terrible person. Let's wind this up.
I followed your career really closely.
I'm dyslexic. Anyway, that's my last excuse. All right, thanks, Dave.
All right, thank you.
Cheers, guys.